Hello and welcome to another episode of A Wicked Parley. Tonight we're going to be discussing the cost of living, particularly how much does it cost to live and why. Now, one of the major themes that you might be able to associate with is the fact that money is a thing. Money is important. Money is used in virtually every facet of your life. And I'm pretty sure you can know that when it comes to money, you need to be able to pay your bills. Bills. Very important things to pay for. And how do you pay those bills? Well, with money. Now, in generations past, communities used to do things a little bit differently. As such, it was quite common for people to talk about something called the American Dream and to pursue it. And many of you guys have probably heard the notion of American Dream and wondered, what is that? Well, to put it in layman's terms, the idea of the American Dream is you can go and buy a home. You can have that house in the suburbs, the white picket fence, as you were. You make enough money to be able to support yourself and potentially children and even a wife if you're a guy. Or even if you're not a guy, just a person in general at this point as we're speaking to it. Well, that dream is bullshit. And it's formulated because corporations wanted to sell you that idea in the first place. Politicians in the 1950s and 60s also sold you that particular idea because they wanted to motivate you to do better. And in some ways, that dream that was talked about was attainable at a time for a very small period of time. But today, we don't really have easy access to that dream, and only a very small group of people ever get the opportunity to be able to pursue that. And that has a lot to do with the way in which the economy, the way in which people earn an income and sustain a living. One of the things that's kind of crazy to think about is that if you look at the actual annual average salary of most Americans, they make a certain amount of money. That points to the fact that there hasn't been a significant increase in the income, in comparison to inflation since about 1973, which means that most Americans today are not anywhere near where they want to be, and they're no closer to that American dream for many Americans out there. Now, I know that for the most part, our particular audience is a younger audience that maybe is pursuing higher education or working a hard job to get to a goal that they have. And I don't want to discourage you by saying, hey, you're not going to be able to get there, because you will. It just means that there's going to be a small group of people who are also going to get there, but they're going to get there much earlier. And that's because they have inherent advantages that you don't have. Now, one of the consequences of having this particular type of problem is the fact that because it costs so much to live, there's a lot of unexpected things that you may not take into consideration that affect your life. One of the chief and most important things that's noted around the world is the fact that in most, we'll say, industrialized countries, considering them, first world countries, have this really odd problem right now. That problem is they aren't having children. Population numbers are either stagnating or actually dropping below what would be considered their peers only maybe a couple decades ago, which means that there's going to be a massive problem as the population gets older. There will not be as many people to be able to fill in the jobs that are necessary to provide services. It could be very well possible, if you're looking at this particular video today, that in 20 or 30 years, if you need to go see a pharmacist or a doctor or something that requires some sort of degree, that you might be seen by a very elderly person or be put on a wait list that's so long that it might take you months before you ever get seen for your problem. And let's hope that that's not a life-threatening illness. Otherwise, you're going to be in real bad shape. Or, God forbid, dead. Not dead. So, when it comes to these particular things, what can we do about it? Well, there's actually a number of things that we can actually do. The first is that we can understand the reality of the situation and choose acceptable, reasonable, attainable goals. That's one thing that I think is really helpful that anybody can do at any level. You don't have to make a whole bunch of money. You can work a little job and, make this goal, this goal, this goal, and this goal, and it works. It's fine. You can do it. And, it doesn't take very much. Let's say hypothetically we just talk about saving money, right? I know money can be tight sometimes, but I'm pretty sure that everyone indulges every now and then on a treat to themselves, whether it be buying a burrito, getting maybe that particularly nice new jacket, or taking a fancy trip somewhere. Well, in the course of doing any one of those things, you probably have some budget in mind. Well, if you take half of that particular budget and set it aside, and guess what? That's saving. It could be 50 cents, a nickel, $15, $500, $1,000. Any of it matters. And by having a savings, it then allows you to have some sort of capital to put towards something that might be an ambition of yours or a goal or a dream in the future. This could go towards the down on a new car, the down on a new house, or it could be just that rainy day fund for when things don't go just right. All of these things can be things that can be helpful to you, so that way you don't get screwed when economic downturn inevitably happens. Now, the consequences of the cost of living associating with the fact that A, you might not be able to have kids, or you might not be able to have kids when you want them, is a big problem. It's a big, big problem. Because obviously, kids aren't being born, then people aren't going to be replacing the certain positions. So we're going to have a huge problem and a difference of, we'll say, power, perhaps, maybe. You could see that certain countries that have tons of people in their population start having a little bit more weight to throw around. Or we could have the situation I kind of discussed already with the pharmacist being not able to get what you need. There's also a couple other things that are kind of important when it comes to this that's probably also not necessarily going right over people's heads. If women are aware of the fact that they need money to do certain things, right? And what's the likelihood that a woman is going to want to engage in a relationship which could eventually lead to kids if they're not physically prepared for this particular thing? And I've talked to many women out there, many women who basically say they don't want to do shit with anything until they're basically ready. What does that really mean for you guys out there? Well, guys who are looking for women out there like that, it means that your financial shit needs to be together. Otherwise, no chance. And let's be real here. Do you really want to be responsible for a kid and a wife and not being able to pay for shit? That's a terrible situation. I know. When I was a kid, that was my situation. And it was not good. It was stressful for everybody in the household. It was horrible. Do not recommend this at all. No recommendation. None. Zero. Declined. Nada. Gone. Where you go? Gone. Let's talk about something else. So, for the next thing we're going to be discussing, we're going to be talking about the location of where you live and how it affects your overall ability to have a positive outcome in your life. Now, when you think about where you live, there's a few things that might be going on in your head. First of all, am I near a freeway, a public school? If I have children, are you near, anything that's considered like shopping area or a quick, easy access to a grocery store? How much foot travel do I have? Like, how many steps does it take for me to get to one place or another? Or do I need a car or a bike? These things matter quite a bit because these things are going to be the things that affect your life directly. And guess what? If you don't make a certain amount of money, then you don't get the ability to partake in those particular services in your immediate area. And why is that? Because you're priced out of the market. You might ask yourself, well, what the fuck does that mean? How can I be priced out of the market? Well, put it simply, there's two ways this goes down. First way is that in order to get, let's say, a house, or let's say you're going to rent a property, if you can't buy a house, then you have to make a certain amount of income to qualify for that particular house. Then you have a credit score system to work with. If you don't have a 650 credit score or higher, then you're kind of shit out of luck at being able to get any rental properties. Whether that be an apartment, townhouse, house itself, all of those things require a good credit score. That sucks if you don't have that. And guess what? You're incentivized to have a shitty credit score because you're incentivized to get a credit card and buy a bunch of shit. And then you're incentivized to not pay the full balance of that credit card because the cost of living is so damn high that you can't make a reasonable payment. Instead, you're usually making the minimum. What happens? A cycle of slavery. Okay, maybe slavery is a little too harsh. More specifically, you're basically going to be stuck in a perpetual loop that puts you at the bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder because you're going to constantly have to pay into a system in order to access. Essentially, it's pay to play, but you're always going to pay to play, shooting for the highest spot but be stuck at the very bottom. I would akin it to a gacha system in a game where you have to pull for, let's say, something, a character, material, whatever, right? And no matter how much you put into the system, the only thing you can get is the lowest possible rung. That's basically what a credit card system is in the modern day. Which makes me think that there's a reason why cryptocurrencies have exploded and why people want to use them, because it kind of helps break the cycle. It doesn't do it 100%, but it definitely helps in at least a little bit of a way. Circling back to the American dream, I'm going to frame this a little bit better. The American dream specifically, you can cite it back to some time shortly after the events of World War II. The idea being that essentially every American has access to a property, a house ideally, that whole white picket fence mentality, the idea of getting married and having children. All right, you go to your job, your wife stays home, cooks, cleans, your kids get raised, they go to school. It was a whole pitch. It was, in some ways, it was the ultimate selling thing to the American people. And we took that, we ran with it because we loved the idea of basically working within a reasonable amount of time and getting something that was what we really wanted. Does the American dream really make sense in today's age? Does it? I wonder, can that really be? With feminists, basically saying that women have all these things. Even if you agree or disagree, regardless, you can't deny the fact that if a woman is going to pursue a career, which in my mind they should be able to pursue, then it automatically removes a key element of the American dream. Because if you have the housewife who's doing cleaning and the caring of the home, and she is now running a career, how does she have time to do that? The answer is she doesn't. So what, you're gonna pay for a service to have someone come into your home and do that? Well, certainly that's a service that's available to some, but only the very, very, top percent of people are gonna be able to afford a maid to come in the house and clean up. I don't care how, rich you think you are. Let's face it, if you can afford a maid, that means you can afford a lot of things. A lot of things that your peers can't. So what's going on here? Why is this okay? Why is the American dream been still pitched to people in today's age? We're in 2022 talking about the American dream, and yet there are literally hundreds of millions of people who are disadvantaged in this country every single day. In this country, the United States. And the world as a whole, who knows how many? The number is far larger than I could even begin to calculate, but it's alarming. But I'm going to talk about the country here, the United States, because it's the place that's my home, it's what I know. All right. I can tell you this. I live in Sacramento, and there's a massive homeless population in Sacramento, one of the biggest in the state of California. And anyone who's been reading the news or seen anything knows the homeless population in California is a big problem for San Francisco, Sacramento, and even Los Angeles. Los Angeles has got the hugest, big, giant, horrible problem. That's another episode. Okay, but the American dream, what was pitched to us in the 40s and 50s and 60s, isn't the same thing that they're trying to pitch to us today. So what's different? Well, I think it's the fact that they're going to pitch this idea to you that it's okay to rent. You don't need to own anything. You need to be happy renting. And there was this thing that was put forth not too long ago by, I believe, Better Bachelor, who's another YouTube creator, who said that you're going to be happy owning nothing and basically being in nothing. Something analogous to this. And I think that statement kind of rings true. Because if you think about where we're going, if you need to have a higher education to pursue a career field that's going to give you a living wage with just that career, one job, you're not working 2, 3, 4 jobs, then what are we doing here? Because we already know that students are in ridiculous amounts of debt. It literally is going to be a huge problem for anyone who's pursuing higher education. You're going to have immense debt unless you are from a very, very, well-off family, or your family puts you and your education first, which just, it isn't every American. Not everybody can do that. Not everyone comes from that background. So it's a problem. The other side of that coin, right, is, okay, so you're not pursuing higher education and you're working, dozens of jobs. How are you supposed to, after you work dozens of jobs, pay for the freaking place that you're staying, whether it be a rental or you own something, right? Do you have the time to meet somebody, have a family, have kids, care for those kids while providing for them and taking care of your own needs? I don't think that there's enough time in the day to be able to do that in a way that is sustainable for a period of time long enough for those kids to grow up, mature, and become functioning adults. I honestly think that this is part of the problem. It's the entire structure of the society today. Everything that they do is, we're going to create something that you want. Then we're going to sell it to you. We're going to pitch it to you as hard as we possibly can. And then once you have that thing, we're going to pull the rug underneath your feet. We're going to force you into a situation. Now you're stuck here. Deal with it. That's what it kind of feels like when I see all these particular ads of credit cards coming in, when it comes to high interest rates, when it comes to student loans, whether it comes to, anything that goes on. And you look at the property prices of places, right? So regardless if you're renting or you're buying, you're paying thousands of dollars for something that is maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe 1,000. I've been recently looking at apartments, and I gotta tell you, it's a fucking nightmare. I remember about 15 years ago, an apartment in the area I live in was about $1,000 for a decent 2-bed, 2-bath, okay? For a decent one, not a shitty one, decent one, okay? It's double today for a so-so one. That's crazy. And that's just an apartment. I can't imagine if you're trying to buy a house or you're renting a house. It's crazy. And these problems and so many more are problems that we're going to have to deal with today. So, my question to you guys is this. Do you feel that you have been given a raw deal? Do you think that you've been given no options, no choices, nothing you can do about it? You think that you're pigeonholed into one direction and that's it? You're stuck there? I'd like to hear about it in the comments below. I'd like to email the show, at awickedparley@gmail.com. Go ahead and tell us your story. I'd like to hear back. I'd like to know, are you in the same situation? Or do you know people who are in the same situation? Share your experience. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And if you like this particular episode, hit the like button. And we'll see you in the next one. Good night, everybody.